There are more big cats living in basements and backyards in America than there are left in the wild. This presentation is a timeline of the big cat crisis, how it began, and how we got to where we are. My name's Carol Baskin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Big Cat Rescue. We are caring for more than 100 exotic cats, and more importantly, working to end the trade. We provide rescue, rehab, and a permanent home. We do this with the help of more than 100 volunteers. The sanctuary started with the rescue of a single bobcat named Windsong. She was being sold at an auction where the people bidding on her were taxidermists who were buying these animals to stuff them and turn them into den decorations. Bobcats make awful pets, but by the time we figured that out, we were in too deep, because we had in the meanwhile gone to a fur farm where 56 lynx like Windsong were going to be killed for their fur, and came home with all 56. If you love animals, this could happen to you too. It's true, if you build it, they will come, and our phone started ringing off the hook with people saying, "Would you take my lion? Would you take my tiger? Would you take my cougar?" I had no idea people had these kinds of animals as pets, but back then the only people we could ask for advice were the breeders and dealers. We started getting calls from people who were reporting that they saw tigers in truck stops. Sometimes these people reported it in person when they came to visit the sanctuary. This was in a pre-internet world, and back then the tigers were at a truck stop in Texas. We rescued our first tiger in 1995, and his name was Shere Khan. He came from a backyard breeder in Flat Rock, Indiana, who was later the focus of a documentary called The Tiger Next Door. It spoke about how people were constantly breeding tigers in the hopes of producing a white tiger. But as far back as 1983, the curator of what was then the Bronx Zoo had announced to Geo magazine and also to the AZA that white tigers are freaks. It's not the role of a zoo to show two-headed calves and white tigers. The reason is because of all of the inbreeding that goes to create a white tiger, and we purposely chose not to rescue white tigers until 2004, when we rescued 5 big cats from a failed zoo, and one of them was a white tiger who was bonded to a lion. We couldn't break them up, so we rescued Zabu and Cameron. But back to the timeline, in 1995, we began giving tours of the sanctuary. We only had 45 guests our first year, but we started collecting names and addresses and began sending out newsletters to those who had come to the sanctuary. Our tours have always been guided and were an hour and a half long. In 1996, we launched our first website, and boy, the complaints started to pour in from around the world about the abuses that big cats were suffering. We began to see that the internet was going to be the way to reach the most people. Our site quickly became an international resource for everything about big cats. By 97, we had figured out that none of the exotic cats in private hands are involved in any legitimate conservation breeding, so we stopped all breeding, buying, and selling, and became a voice for these animals because they don't belong in cages. In 98, we attended the Small Felid Workshop, and then worked with the Felid Taxon Advisory Group in discussing cage spaces in AZA-accredited zoos, and then in 99 hosted the workshop in Costa Rica to enable the education of people in other countries as well. Probably the worst thing to ever happen to tigers in the U.S. was the 1998 generic tiger exemption. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had so many people who were inbreeding tigers to create white coats that they decided to create an exemption for white tigers or generic tigers so that they did not have to be registered. In 99, we had been on Jack Hanna's show and garnered international attention. A veterinarian who had worked with more than 250 white tigers and also with Siegfried and Roy called us. He said that he wanted to expose the myth of the white tiger and show why it was so wrong for these animals to be bred. Dr. Dan Laughlin said that it was the greatest conservation deception of the American public in history, and that the deception continues through to today. We told everyone who would listen about the white tiger myth. We spoke to the American Zoological Association, USDA, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and spoke out at every opportunity about the abuses that these big cats were facing in captivity. Even the USDA had ruled that beating big cats with a baseball bat was considered acceptable training techniques. Thankfully, across the country, there were groups coming together under the name Humane USA Political Action Committee, and this was the largest group of people who were dedicated entirely to making sure that animal-friendly candidates were put in office. They raise about $250,000 per year, and it's the most important money that can possibly go into politics. I spent most of the year 2000 trying to recreate our database, which crashed in the Y2K scare. But nothing was ever as scary as the year 2001. Of course, we all remember 9/11, but for Big Cat Rescue, it was the year that tourism and donations just stopped. There was no money coming in and no way to feed more than 100 big cats at the sanctuary. We survived 2001, and by 2002 there was a bill introduced into Congress called the Captive Wildlife Safety Act, which would make it illegal to sell a big cat across state lines as a pet. It died in committee, but it takes most of these types of animal protection bills 6 years or 3 sessions in Congress. The bill was reintroduced in 2003, and we publicized it wildly. We knew that this could save thousands of big cats, far more than we would ever be able to rescue. There was even a story circulating about how a 9-year-old boy used his mother's credit card to order a tiger and have it delivered to their door. Thankfully, in 2003, this act became law, and it prohibited the sale of big cats across state lines as pets. It exempted USDA licensees, and it didn't have any rules to even enforce it until 2007, but we saw an immediate benefit for the cats. Every other year, the number of cats we were having to turn away was doubling, so that by 2003, we had to turn away 312 cats in a single year. After this bill passed, the numbers dropped dramatically, and they continued to drop as 8 more states passed bans and partial bans. What we discovered from this is that laws are the only way to end the suffering and abuse. You just can't educate people not to be stupid with big cats. If they're allowed to do it, they'll do it, and the laws stop them from being able to do that. 2003 marked the beginning of social networking, and we joined in the conversation with our first MySpace page. We also began posting comments online on news stories. What we found is that people would be saying, "Oh, isn't that cute? I want a tiger." But we could change the direction of their thinking and tell them all of the reasons why that was so cruel if we could join them while they were thinking about the issues in real time. 2003 also marked the first Taking Action for Animals conference in Washington, D.C. My husband and I go every year, and we just love it. It's 3 days of training sessions and then lobby day. You get to see the experts in action and then try your own hand at it, and having them right there is really helpful and empowering. What we've learned is it's not what you know, but who you know. We want to make sure that our lawmakers know about cat issues, so we invest $25,000 a year in CapWiz in order to connect our supporters with their lawmakers. We also use this for sending out our e-zines, sending out alerts on bills, and sending out alerts about abuses that big cats are facing. In 2004, we joined Facebook. Our Facebook fans have been wonderful. They've helped us win a truck, they've helped us win $25,000 in an online voting contest, and they join in the conversation with us every day about different ways to protect big cats. USDA was trying to crack down on the number of people who were being mauled and killed by big cats, but inadvertently created a 4-week window between the ages of 8 and 12 weeks, during which time cubs could be petted. The breeders and dealers exploited this like mad. By 2005, we had figured out that video was probably the best way to reach the most people, and this is when we joined YouTube. It was here that we could actually expose the horrible conditions that these cats are forced to live in backyards and basements all across America. In 2005, I was elected to the Humane USA Political Action Committee and made the state rep in Florida. I still believe this is the most important kind of contribution you can make and would suggest that you make such donations to the Humane Society Legislative Fund. In 2005, Haley Hildebrand, a 17-year-old teenager, was killed by a tiger while posing for a yearbook photo at a local backyard zoo. It was already illegal to allow such conduct, but unfortunately most of these rules are not enforced. In 2006, Haley's Act, which was a bill that would ban the contact with big cats, was introduced by the International Fund for Animal Welfare. It usually takes about 6 years to get through all of the congressional committees necessary in order for a bill to become law. It died in 2006 and was reintroduced in 2007, and we promoted it in ads, alerts, petitions, handwritten letters, anything that we could do to try and make Haley's Act a law. But again, it died in committee in 2007. Big Cat Rescue joined the International Tiger Coalition as one of the 42 founding members, such as World Wildlife Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, Born Free, and many others. It was promoted by Harrison Ford and supported by the World Bank. The ITC's goal was to double the number of tigers in the wild, and our goal was to show that we needed to stop the captive trade in these magnificent creatures if that was ever going to happen. Thousands of tigers are being bred, raised, and killed on Chinese tiger farms for their parts. But we can't ask the Chinese to stop this practice when the U.S. doesn't even know where their tigers are. This was illustrated in a paper called Paper Tigers that was put out by a group called Traffic. They were also members of the International Tiger Coalition. Undercover investigations are critical to exposing the abusers. We set up a site called 911animalabuse.com so that when people saw abuse, they could post their photos, videos, and stories and warn others about what was happening. By 2008, we had been so successful in getting the word out about white tigers and why it was so wrong to be inbreeding them that the AZA sent out a memo to their member zoos asking them not to breed white tigers any longer. In our 20-year history, we have had more complaints about Tony the truck stop tiger than any other single situation. And in 2009, we heard about a woman named Skye Williamson who seemed to be fighting the battle alone. We tracked her down to give her an award. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries called upon us to help them seize Tony the truck stop tiger. But when we got there, the owner, Michael Sandlin, had gotten an injunction against the removal. We then hired a lawyer to argue that Tony had been held there illegally based upon a 1993 ban. In Louisiana, there is a truck stop that uses a live tiger as a gimmick to sell gas. The tiger, named Tony, has lived in these conditions for 8 years, breathing in the fumes of the diesels and the trucks, and listening to these sounds. When Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries gave the owner 30 days to find a new home for Tony, instead of doing the right thing, he chose to file a lawsuit. Some of Tony's friends spoke up for him in court.
Display of wildlife or exotic animals prohibited ordinance was created to protect the community. I have provided you with the most current data of the U.S. big cat incidents, along with a copy of 20 years of violations from the USDA by Michael Sandlin. I have also provided a copy of the petition which I started, which has 1,191 signatures on it at this time. These people are showing support for the ordinance that's already on the books from 1993. We feel the tiger needs to be in a different environment for his own health and safety, and even more to protect the public. This ordinance can and will do that. Children are being mauled and killed by escaped tigers, and still people feel they have the right to own them. The only way you can ensure the public safety is to not have a privately owned tiger in your community. Again, 20 years of violations from the USDA, which only require the bare minimum. And with that, there is no way that Michael Sandlin will ever meet the requirements to get a Louisiana state permit. For many, many years, concerned citizens across the United States have done everything they could to have these tigers removed from the truck stop before an incident happens. The opportunity is here in front of us to make sure the community is safe from a tiger attack or a escape. Please, for you, for me, for the safety of the community, and the sake of the tiger, enforce this 1993 ordinance. If Tony is released to a humane sanctuary, he will be properly cared for the rest of his life by professionals, not tiger truck stop employees. Please support the Louisa Wildlife and Fishery decision to remove Tony, the tiger, from this disgraceful display. I can only hope that Louisiana takes a stance on this issue like many other states already have.
Big Cat Rescue offered Sandlin a permanent retirement home for Tony, but he says it's his right to own a tiger.
Yesterday we filed a lawsuit in order to protect our rights to continue to exhibit tigers in Everville Parish. To defend ourselves from the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries that ordered us to remove and relocate the tiger. Tourist truck drivers, old and young, residents and non-residents alike, have found tremendous joy from watching our tigers and the 10 cubs that have been born at the Tiger Truck Stop over the past 21 years.
Where are those cubs now? Sandlin's sign says that they went to zoos, but legitimate zoos don't accept tigers from the private sector. None of the cubs born at such facilities are pedigreed, and so they can't be used in conservation programs. If you go inside the truck stop diner, you'll find one of the unlucky white tigers. She's stuffed and mounted over the buffet table as a decoration. She was only 4 when she mysteriously died.
Please do not give in to animal rights activists who think that they know what is best for the tiger.
If you have to post signs that say please don't throw rocks at the tiger, then it's no place for a tiger. We think you'll agree that sending Tony to Big Cat Rescue would be best. We need you to speak up for Tony. Get the facts and see free ways to help at freetony.com. Check out freetony.com. In 2010, Tony's story even made it onto CNN, but as of 2012, he's still listening to the sound of those diesel engines in the truck stop in Grosse-Tete, Louisiana. In 2010, we started using Google Alerts to help us send out alerts to our support base whenever there were big cats in the news. Because of this, we were able to send thousands of emails, comments, letters, and alerts to educate people about why it's wrong to keep these animals in cages. In 2010, the governor of Ohio banned the private possession of dangerous animals, and Florida began to enforce a $10,000 bond requirement. We were also able to stop the practice of fox penning, where foxes and bobcats would be turned loose in an enclosure for hunters to sick their dogs on them to rip them to shreds. In 2011, we hired a PR person to explain to the fairs and malls that the cubs that are used in photo and petting displays are bred for that purpose, used for a 4-week window, and then often discarded or relegated into horrible backyard cages. As the result of these efforts, we began to see the public opinion shift. The media began to get over the cuteness factor and really start to look at what happens to these cats when they can no longer be used as photo and petting props.
This isn't a zoo. These adorable tigers are caged up at a mall where between Christmas shopping, people can pay to get their pictures taken with them. We found this tiger exhibit at the Northgate Mall in Cincinnati.
$55 total.
For $55, you can get your picture taken with a cub and play with the babies in a cage. But the 8-week-old cub I got to pet was obviously sick and barely moved during our visit.
Why do you think he's sick? Maybe he's just tired. Maybe he's just stressed about something.
Another cub on display was missing a patch of fur and clearly not happy to have its photo taken. These guys were also at the exhibit. They're 6 months old and already dangerous. They're kept behind a cage because by law, the public is not allowed to interact with tigers older than 3 months. And here's why.
That's what happened yesterday. There's blood everywhere.
This employee told us he got scratched up by one of these older tigers just the day before.
It was just a total mess.
We showed our video to Adam Roberts from the animal rights group Born Free. He says these traveling tiger shows exploit the tigers and endanger the public.
Anybody who puts them in close contact with the public is creating a recipe for disaster.
But what Roberts says is even more disturbing is where these cubs often end up when they're too old for pictures, caged and kept as pets in people's backyards. Believe it or not, there are more tigers living in Americans' backyards than there are living in the wild. So where do these cubs come from? Joe Schreibvogel is the president of the company that operates that traveling tiger exhibit in the mall. Many of the cubs used in the exhibit were born in captivity at his exotic animal park in Oklahoma, a nonprofit roadside zoo home to over 200 tigers. While denying any wrongdoing, he paid $25,000 for repeated animal welfare violations in 2006 and is currently under investigation by the USDA for the unexplained deaths of 23 tiger cubs at his park.
How did your 23 tigers die?
Bad formula.
You've had to pay $25,000 in fines. You've had 23 of your tigers die. Do you think that you're a responsible owner of tigers?
I damn sure do.
Schreibvogel says he takes good care of his tigers and displays them for educational purposes. And he blames the death of those 23 cubs on bad milk formula. But both the formula manufacturer and the FDA, which tested it, told us the formula was safe.
In 2011, the AZA went from making it a suggestion to making it a policy that white tigers not be bred in member zoos. The reasoning was that the inbreeding necessary to create the white coats also goes along with a plethora of crippling birth defects. China joined a host of other countries that banned the use of big cats in circus acts, and for the first time the U.S. introduced a bill into Congress that would make it illegal to use big cats in circus acts as well. In 2011, Rose Church, a pro bono attorney for Ian Somerhalder, star of The Vampire Diaries, contacted us to ask if there was anything Ian could do to help Tony the tiger. At that time there was not, but we told her about the cub petting issue, and she was very happy to get involved. Rose contacted the Dean of the Massachusetts School of Law, Diane Sullivan, and asked for a list of all of the people I knew who might care about these tiger issues. I gave her my contacts from the International Tiger Coalition. Rose and people at IFAW worked on the list and brought together a coalition that met in July of 2011. We came up with a 3-prong attack on the big cat crisis. The plan was to close the generic tiger exemption, to close the 4-week window that allows cubs to be petted between the ages of 8 and 12 weeks, and to introduce a federal ban on the private possession of dangerous big cats. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service received more than 15,000 comments from those asking that the generic tiger exemption be rescinded. The coalition has met as a group with USDA to discuss ways that we can close that 4-week window during which time cubs are bred for photo and petting ops. And in March of 2012, the Big Cats Act was introduced into the House and will soon be introduced into the Senate. Find out more at bigcatrescue.org or catlaws.com. And find out how you can help end the big cat crisis in America.